Hello everyone.
Hi.
We're filming, brilliant. Okay, we are focusing on this video today, one of our absolute favourite topics, which is all about supporting you lovely lot during the fourth trimester. That is the 12 weeks that follow the baby being born. And we want to share with you some brilliant nuggets of information, all about really how to look after your mind and your body in those early weeks after your baby or your babies have been born.
And we know at the moment we've had lots and lots of lovely messages from women who are feeling really vulnerable right now. Kind of, you know, obviously when we have a newborn, our hormones go through the roof and our kind of protection mode kicks in. And having to self-isolate is making them feel quite lonely and quite vulnerable. We actually are quite big fans of mums staying in after they've had their baby. So we've been doing lots of reassuring and lots of sort of talking about actually what the benefits are of really slowing down the postnatal period and kind of reframing that a little bit. So we thought actually it'd be really nice to share that with you here, just because actually it's a really good time to embrace staying in, slowing down. And we often say to women, 1 week in bed, 1 week on the sofa, and lots of women kind of look at us like they'll never be able to do that, and maybe now is the time to really embrace that if you can.
So we'll go into that in a little bit more detail in a minute. I think it's really important to know, and this is something that we talk about a lot. We have been very fortunate, Becky and I both worked with many wonderful international midwives. We've learned so much from them, but also we both amazingly had the opportunity to work abroad. I went and did just over a week, a couple of years ago in Morocco, working in a postnatal capacity over there. And it was so interesting and incredible how much energy and time and space they put in place for women in the weeks that follow the baby being born, and how they are incredibly intentional about taking off any extra load, any extra responsibilities, other than healing your body physically, adjusting your mind to motherhood, and looking after your newborn baby. And I know, Becky, you've worked abroad as well.
Yeah, I have. And in cultures where, particularly in Asia, where women do have lying-in periods or confinement periods, and they go to bed for up to 40 days, which I know sounds crazy to us because we're not really set up, you know, for that sort of confinement, although now we might be. Yeah, but actually the benefit to mum, you know, the importance is on mum's recovery. Lots of female relatives come round. Obviously that's a bit difficult to replicate at the moment, but we'll talk about ways that we can use kind of digital media to replicate that a little bit. But the importance is very much on mum's recovery, with the onus being that if mum's okay, baby's going to be okay, because at the end of the day, you know, we need to be strong enough to care for our baby. One story I always like to share, just to sort of show how stoic and sometimes slightly crazy our response to the postnatal period can be in this culture, is when I was working with some Mexican midwives, and we were talking about our bodies and society, and we were talking about the bounce back, you know, how in the UK people are kind of congratulated for being out early, and how we sort of say, oh, she looked really well on day 3, she was out at the park. And one of the midwives said, oh, so you work really hard to get pregnant, and then you carry your baby for 9 months and you give birth to your baby. And then she kind of looked really confused and she said, and then you have to not look like you've had a baby. And actually, when you watch someone try and make sense of something that you just take for, you know, as how it is, kind of makes you realise how ludicrous that is, and how actually embracing the postnatal period a little bit more, and it's okay to look like we've just had a baby, you know, we have, and sort of not putting that pressure on ourselves to rush back to looking like we did before.
And we're going to talk you through a bit of the science in a minute as to what's going on in your body at that time, so you understand why we're talking about how important it is to take that time slowly and really give yourself time and space to adjust to it. I'm as guilty as the next person. I didn't do it with my second and third, but with my first baby, I was out at the supermarket. I'll never forget going up Say No's 3 days after my son was born. And I look at the photographs now and I look like a rabbit caught in the headlights, because we took a photograph of me standing in the mum and baby car parking space, because, you know, or parent and baby car parking space. And I remember being so proud of being out and about, but I was on my knees, sort of adjusting physically and mentally to the fact I was now a parent, regardless of the fact that I was a midwife before that. So just something to think about.
Yeah.
So we're going to break it down. We're going to have a little look at the first 2 weeks, then the following 2 weeks, and then take ourselves up to the 6 weeks and be thinking about what we can do with ourselves during that time. So if we start from right immediately after their baby's born. Now, obviously this is a sign of the times at the moment. If everything has gone within normal limits with regards to your birth, and there's no reason you need to stay in the hospital, it is highly likely that you may, at the moment, be discharged perhaps slightly earlier than you would have been if we didn't have the viral situation that we've got. And then it is possible, and I'm not generalising because I know every area is doing stuff slightly differently, but you may not have the amount of visits that you would have had prior to this happening at the moment, face to face with your midwife. I think they're all doing things slightly differently, but you might not be seeing the midwife immediately afterwards, coming to your house the day after you go home. On day 5, you tend to see the midwife as well for weights, for blood tests of the baby, and then generally on day 10, around about that time, for a discharge visit. This is changing at the moment, so you get that. Now,
and it's changing daily, so it's hard to know, and it's changing from trust to trust. So what we do know is that where face-to-face visits aren't happening, they are putting in place virtual assessments, and again, one of the things we talk about is trusting your instinct. You know, if you feel that you're not okay, don't feel bad about ringing. You know, just talking to somebody on the phone, sometimes we can actually assess quite a lot over the phone. We can reassure a lot of, because a lot of the worries you may have will be worries that every single new mum has, and so ringing up your midwife and they'll be able to reassure you and talk you through it, and it will be a very often something quite simple. So don't worry. I think that's the main thing. Like, you might not get the face-to-face visits, but you will not be left alone.
No, and like we said, reach out, any questions, you just need a bit of reassurance. Please still know that it's important that you are getting those things at that time.
I think, another thing is with social media, often lots of people now are talking about being careful with social media, and, you know, there's a lot of hype around the virus and people are getting quite worried, but actually there's also a lot of really good stuff going on social media at the moment. And our friend Vanessa, who's an amazing lactation consultant, so
she's a nurse, she's incredibly experienced, and she just so happens to have an adorable babe herself at the moment who she is feeding as well.
And she's doing, I'll just have a look when they are actually. She's going to be doing free breastfeeding tutorials on Tuesday, every Tuesday on Zoom. And she's on Instagram, Vanessa_the Parent and Baby Clinic. And her website, I think she's Vanessa Christie, so you can look her up. But again, there's a lot of people putting a lot. We're going to be posting videos daily of, and this one's very much based on postnatal care. So have a look at those as well. There's a lot of really good information out there, and stuff that will be really valuable to you right now.
Vanessa also has a book called the infant feeding book. The baby feeding book. That's it, the baby feeding book. And it covers a multitude of any sort of feeding, breastfeeding, bottle feeding, weaning, any of those things. It's available. I'm just putting it out there because I know that she is brilliant at what she does, and we just want to share that with you if you're needing any more information at the moment.
And again, it's something, you know, breastfeeding can be tricky, so it's a good, you know, a good sort of resource to have, and she covers all sorts of feeding in there, so it's no judgment completely.
And she's going to do a little IGTV, especially for us at the Mother Box, that we will be posting one of these evenings. So she's going to do a bit of a kind of around about the virus and just giving you guys some more information about that alongside feeding your babies. So we'll be sharing that.
And I think equally, obviously, if anyone's got any physical ailments, you know, like pelvic girdle pain, if that carries on hanging around postnatally, although a lot of physios aren't able to do hands-on treatment anymore, Brighton Women's Health physio team are doing online consultations, so they can assess you online and just give you some kind of hints and tips. So if anyone's got any problems, you can always DM us and we can send you the links to those. Our friend Tina is I know she's doing phone consultations and online consultations. So there is still stuff available. We might just need to give you a little hand, like pointing you in the right direction.
And it just might be a different way of accessing it than you were before, but it will still be there, because believe us, you know, the women and the men who are working in these services, they want to still provide care for you. This is what we're here for. This is what we're in it for. So just bear that in mind. So we'll share what we have, and then you know, we'll add that in like the notes and stuff, so that you can be, you know, we can point you in the right direction when it comes to those things.
Definitely.
But going back to the first 2 weeks, so regardless of whether what's going on at the moment was going on, we always suggest, Beccy, one of her taglines is 1 week in bed and 1 on the sofa. A little bit of defensive practice here. We are not saying stay in bed and don't move. Absolutely not. You need to be mobilising, even if you've had a caesarean section or there's been some special circumstances. Perhaps even more so, gentle mobilisation is very, very important. We don't want any of you getting DVTs or anything like that. Going to the toilet and coming back to bed and just gently moving your body, still very important.
And you'll get stiff otherwise if you don't move. So, you know, get up, have a little stretch, walk to the loo, have a wee, walk back again, but always returning to bed in the first week. So pretty much using bed as your base with some gentle mobilisation. But basically in that first week, you're establishing feeding if you're breastfeeding. Even if you're not breastfeeding, you still need to have skin to skin. You need it, baby needs it. It's very calming. And
you need to feel your oxytocin levels. So just bearing in mind, and this is one of the things for the first week in particular to look at. We've mentioned this before, I will mention it again because it is huge. Your body is going through a massive hormonal rebalancing, okay? So after your baby is born, and in order to release the placenta and to your brain to basically work with your body, acknowledging that it's going into the postnatal period, acknowledging that it's not pregnant anymore, needing to provide for your baby inside, what happens is you have a massive drop in your estrogen and your progesterone, let alone everything else that's happening inside of you with adrenaline and cortisol levels and, you know, the relaxin restabilizing, so many different hormones at play, prolactin coming into its role, creating the milk. We're needing that oxytocin again to release it to the baby if you are breastfeeding your baby, for example. There's so much going on internally that it's not surprising that, especially in those sort of 7 days that follow the baby being born, you may well find that you are quite reactive, you feel quite overstimulated, you feel quite sort of edgy and you're not quite sure why. 80% of women will experience what's referred to as the baby blues, which is like you can feel euphoric 1 minute and then the next minute you're just on your knees and you're crying and you don't understand why. You look at your baby, you find yourself in floods of tears, they're just so beautiful, and then the next minute you feel really low and you can't understand it. Just remember that a lot of that is going to be to do with sort of the biochemistry of what's going on in your brain at the moment, the hormones and how they're resettling. Obviously, if that becomes too much, please reach out and speak to your midwife and just let them know that you're feeling that way. Obviously, if you have any history at all of any anxieties, depression, things like that, they'll be taking note of that as well. But it is very normal that regardless of whether you've ever felt like that before, you're likely to feel a little bit up and down in the week that follows the baby being born. And also remember, your body is physically healing from birthing. Even if everything, you know, was in normal limits, when there were no special circumstances or risk factors at all. So on paper, it looks like there shouldn't be any reason that you should be feeling that way. No, your body is still massively adjusting. And your brain, on top of everything else, is getting used to the fact that you've got a new little human being to look after.
Definitely.
And it's going to be responding in kind to that awareness and that knowledge.
And that's why we say skin to skin is so important, because you need that physical contact. You need to smell your baby, you need to see your baby, and your baby needs to smell and see and hear you as well. And it's calming for both of you, and it's amazing, you know, if your baby's hot, your body cools down to cool your baby down. If your baby's cold, your body warms up. You know, that kind of biofeedback, you know, is amazing between
your
you and your
areola.
baby.
If you're planning or you are breastfeeding your baby, your areola creates a little serum that smells like amniotic fluid tastes for your baby. So it's sending all these lovely signs out to your baby that this is safe, this is home, this is where you're going to be protected. And that's why babies so often feel very comforted when they're having skin to skin with their mums or their other parents as well. So just bearing that in mind, that and not necessarily having to do it in regards to doing a feed necessarily, just putting them in the center of your chest, allowing them to be next to your heartbeat, you know, listen to your voice, Be aware of the environment. You know, is it very bright in the house? Is there lots of loud TV going on? Now, babies do get used to whatever sounds are in your house. So, for example, if you've got a dog that barks or other children that tend to be making lots of noise, that will become their normal and they'll be okay with that. But just, you know, where you can, just acknowledging and being aware of your surroundings and how that can also help you as a new mum or a new significant other, just kind of feel as calm, as relaxed as possible so that you can really sort of meet the needs of your baby in those early days.
Absolutely. So I guess leading on from that, actually, one of the things that often we find some women don't know, but could be really handy having a heads up about, is the tears that come in with the milk. Particularly when there are other things going on. So kind of particularly at the moment when people are a bit worried and anxieties are high and everything's a bit uncertain. So the milk generally comes in about day 3, 4, sometimes a little bit later if you've had a section, or maybe if you're a little bit unwell after having a baby.
Just to explain, because you might not know, that before day 3 you will still be having a form of milk which is called colostrum, which is a much smaller amount, absolutely heaving with antibodies. I'm sure Vanessa will talk more about this, but it is still there. And carry on putting your baby as much as possible to the breast if it is the first few days for you, so they can get that, because that then sends the message again to the brain, we've got a baby here, the baby's feeding from the breast, and then your milk gradually starts to come in over the next 3-4 days.
So the more skin to skin, and that's why babies feed quite often as well, because you'll suddenly see, usually around sort of day 2, 3, they have this ravenous, they want to be on the whole time, because they're clever, they're bringing the milk in. However, with the milk, that hormone can make you feel quite tearful, and particularly if you've got stuff going on as well. So, and I think sometimes it's just good to have a heads up. With my 2, I think I sobbed the whole entire day of day 4, I think mine was. I knew what it was, so I kind of just lent into it, and I think I even watched like a really sad film just to enjoy having a good cry. Because the other thing which we learn is that actually those tears on day 3, 4 actually actively release tension from your body. So they allow your body to expel tension from birth, they allow your body to release tension from pregnancy, they allow all the hormones to start settling down. So actually it's a really good release that your body does. So again, very cleverly, but some people can worry about it, and particularly because there's more talk these days about postnatal depression, some people get this like, oh, am I depressed? And I think it's good to know that hopefully not, you know, actually that's probably just a little bit of day 3, day 4 kind of tears. Keep an eye on yourself, and obviously if it continues then reach out, but I think it's good to know that it's coming.
A bit of something to add here that I'm just thinking about right now that obviously is most pertinent at the moment with what's going on and people being in the home a lot more than they would normally be, is also do acknowledge, you know, if you can yourself, perhaps put your baby to one side if they're having a little sleep and stuff. Try and get, if you haven't got garden space, try and get to a window, open the window up, take some fresh air into your lungs. Between 10 and 3 in the day, you're going to get the majority of the, you know, the light, the natural light. It's dark out the window here right now where we're filming, but try and absorb some of that as well to kind of, that will really help you, I think, you know, settle what's going on in your body and the hormones as well. Don't be in a dark room for 2 weeks. I don't think that would be good for anybody. No. So try and have elements of doing that as well. I think would be really, really useful. Use geranium. So I just wanted to add as well. No, I've said this in when I talk about my essential oils, but if you are able to get your hands on a little bottle of geranium, geranium is an essential oil that is well regarded for its ability to sort of help settle and level, work with your body. It's leveling the hormones. Your body will do that itself, but it's just something that's just another extra layer that you can bring in to just help your body as it is resettling all those hormones, especially in the week that follows. So you could put a few drops on a flannel or a piece of tissue, just hold it in front of your nose and your mouth and just take some lovely, long, slow 4 beats in, 8 beats out, inhale, exhales, and just take that geranium into your body, helping you as you're resettling those hormones.
Nice.
Beautiful.
Lovely. I think the other thing to talk about then, if perhaps if you're not having as much kind of contact with your midwife to come and have a look, is, you know, sore bits. That's something lots of us suffer with postnatally. So again, sometimes it's quite difficult at the moment to access stuff from outside. So we, in our postnatal book, actually, we have a quick and easy cooling pads a recipe for cooling pads that you can make easily at home. So you can make them for your bits and you can make them for your breasts. So generally they're super easy. The idea being that kind of, you know, after birthing vaginally, everything gets a little bit inflamed. It's a bit hot. If you've got stitches, sometimes they can kind of smart slightly, and it's a bit kind of uncomfortable to sit on, and there's a bit of swelling. Once baby's getting used to feeding, sometimes there's a bit of friction on the nipple, and that can cause a little bit of pain. So to make them quite easily, you get your breast pads and your maternity pads, and you lay them on a tray, and you lay the waterproof side down, so the kind of bit that goes on your skin is facing up. In a big jug, chamomile tea we tend to use. If you've got hypericum as well, you can put that in, but chamomile is very healing. So chamomile tea, put about 4 tea bags in a jug, like a big jug, and fill it up with boiling water and leave it to basically steep until it's cool. So probably like half an hour to 40 minutes. Once it's cooled down, get your tray with all your pads on and pour it over the pads. So you're pouring it over so that you'll see them puff up. They'll kind of absorb all of the chamomile and puff up. That's perfect. They're holding the chamomile in place then. And then you put them in the fridge and you leave them to cool down for at least 2 hours before you use them, because you want them to be nice and cold. So then make a big supply up and then leave them in the fridge. If you then have fed your baby and your nipple's a bit sore and it's kind of a bit hot, take baby off, get one of the cold breast pads, shove it in, and then put your bra back up to sort of hold it in place. And it basically takes all the heat out of the nipple, and the chamomile kind of heals any like little kind of cracks in the skin, and it sort of just really cleanses the area. Then take it out, let the breast dry properly before you put it back, because we don't want wet breasts.
Wet, dark, damp on our, you know, the nipples, the breasts, vagina, bottom, any of those places. You want to make sure it's always dry and clean whenever you're putting them back into being covered again, because otherwise they can attract bacteria, and you don't want that happening. With the pads, we use them about for 10 minutes at a time, and once that's done, then just throw them away. Yeah,
unless you've got reusable ones, and then you just pop them in the wash, and then you can kind of wash them and use them again. For your bits, same premise, but you can basically either put a towel down or a water. If you've got any of those Inco pads that have got the waterproof backing, put one of those down, get a pad, and then just push it in place and sit on it. And it is amazing. It takes all the heat and all the inflammation out of your bits. And I have literally seen women sit down and they're like, oh, the kind of relief they get when they sit on those pads. So again, if you've got stitches, try and limit it to kind of about 5-10 minutes maximum, because we don't want to get the stitches too wet and encourage them to kind of, if they're dissolvable, to dissolve too quickly. But 5-10 minutes is absolutely fine. And again, take the pad away, gently dry the area, and pop them in the bin or the wash, whatever you're using. And if you have hemorrhoids, you can get the pad, and you just have to kind of like pop it in. So you have to part your cheeks, pop it up so it touches on the entrance of the anus where the piles are, and again sit down on it. And you know, you can do it while you're feeding, while you're watching telly, 5-10 minutes, and then dry the area and chuck the pad away. But they're really good for just giving you a little bit of relief, and they're like a cold pack. You're taking the inflammation out of the area.
Now listen, if you are finding that you get any temperature or anything like that, and we're talking about, this is aside from viral things with a cough or anything like that going on with the virus at the moment, don't ignore it, because it could be a sign of mastitis. You might have a little blockage going on in the breast. Literally, it's really important for you to sort of know more about this, and we're not going to talk about this in great depth today, which is why we're sort of signposting you over to Vanessa, because she's so brilliant. And speak to your midwife, wherever your trust is, if you're having any issues with the feeding as well. Please don't feel like that's not important. It's incredibly important. But if you also have any sort of a temperature and you find that you're having quite heavy bleeding, for example, you know, occasionally that can be a sign that there's a little infection somewhere in there, either if you've had some stitches or potentially occasionally could be a sign that maybe a little bit of placenta still being left inside. Just don't ignore it, is what we're saying. We can't tell you the reason why that would be happening in the moment, but please call back into the hospital and let them know, so that they can give you a ring and they can find out how best to assess you in those moments. But again, I'm going back to the fact, never ever ignore your instinct and intuition. If you feel like, oh, I'm not quite sure that this is right, and when I was discharged they told me to look out for, you know, A, B and C, and you feel like, you know, something's happening that doesn't feel like it's, you know, within normal limits or how it should be, ring in and just get some reassurance. We would much rather that was going on and you understood what was going on in your body in that moment and it was as it should be.
Definitely. And I guess the other thing is that, you know, don't be isolated. So obviously we are social distancing and we are self-isolating, but use FaceTime, use what's the Zoom, or you know, I had a meeting with some friends on House Party last night, which worked really well, although we all kept having to put our reading glasses on to look at the writing on the screen, which was hilarious. Kind of realised that we're getting old. Everyone was going, oh, what's that say? But use those apps to connect with each other and connect with family. You know, this is something that's coming up time and time again from messages that I'm getting, is that people are really sad that they're not able to kind of see their family. So, you know, get FaceTime on and just sit and have a chat together. There's nothing like kind of, you know, sharing stories and advice and kind of connecting. So
and understand that we totally get, and it's completely understandable that you might be feeling quite emotional that your parents and your family can't come and meet your new baby at the moment, and this was meant to be such an exciting time and you feel like you're almost being cheated a little bit. That is justifiable. And I think that there's something about just acknowledging that you're allowed to feel those feelings. You don't have to bottle them away. And actually, in this postnatal period, when you're adjusting to be a parent, it's very important you don't try and bottle those feelings away and you sort of acknowledge them for what they are. One of the things is I always teach antenatal classes, and my groups always have a WhatsApp group with one another.
Yeah.
And that we always sort of joke that at 4 o'clock in the morning it's invaluable. Well, you know what, right now it's more valuable than it's ever been, and that's 24 hours a day. So checking in, and you know, people in your group might have a bit more information as to what's available locally to you and what they're finding helpful and what they're finding useful. There's going to be so many more things on social media and online that really is going to lean into supporting you guys, and I think just seek those out and make and from the right sources, from people who know what they're talking about and sort of have made that's their profession, and I think that's really important for you to do.
And I think those WhatsApp groups, one of the things that I hear from ladies, which I love, is that they're invaluable at night, because quite often, you know, sometimes if you wake up and an anxiety rises at night, it feels a bit bigger because there's no distraction. And lots of my ladies have said that they then WhatsApped their NCT group and there's been another mum up feeding, and suddenly they're connected and they're chatting, and it's like, I feel okay now, and then they go to sleep better. So, you know, again, do message, because probably there's going to be another mum up feeling exactly the same, so kind of reaching out and supporting each other is
and how amazing through our phones these days there is such an ability to connect with one another. And I always think of us, we're humans, we're pack animals, we don't you know, like to do it on our own and away from everybody else, which is why it feels so tricky at the moment. And so use what there is available to reach out. I think it's never been more important than it is now.
Definitely.
I want to move on to the 3rd and the 4th week. So we've got past that sort of that 1st and 2nd. We've taken our time. We've sort of just tried to keep ourselves as calm and rested as possible, but within, you know, limits. We've tried to get some fresh air in where we're able to do that. We've moved our bodies gently, and we've taken time to really be intentional about acknowledging that our body is healing and we're adjusting to this new role as being a parent. And then we move into a period where perhaps we just feel like we might have a little bit more energy, or you might find that you're on your knees with tiredness. So it really depends. It's such a personal experience as to where you'll be a couple of weeks after your baby is born.
I think one thing that is good to know is that actually weeks 3 and 4, quite often the adrenaline comes crashing down a little bit, and you always say,
oh yeah, don't mistaken adrenaline for energy. So often in those first couple of weeks you can have quite a bit of adrenaline in your body. Now, we just don't want to generalise, because we know that everybody will experience things in different ways. We don't want to tell you how you should be feeling at this time, because there isn't a right and a wrong, genuinely. But if you do find you have a bit of a crash of the old adrenaline on the 3rd or 4th week, and you almost find that emotionally a bit tougher than even the first couple of weeks, then that's totally fine and normal.
And quite common, actually.
Very
quite
much
common.
so.
And I think maybe a good thing to remember as well is that 6 weeks, which is the kind of time frame that we give women, is not really, it's quite,
well, we find it laughable.
It's laughable. I was trying to be polite. It's a laughable time frame. When you think that lots of women are having 40 days in bed and they're being kind of tended and massaged and nurtured and given special foods, you know, and actually from a bodywork point of view, when I did my training, we were told that you are postnatal for 18 months because it takes double the time to come back as it does to expand. So I think that in a way 6 weeks sets us up to feel a little bit like we're failing, because I certainly didn't feel back to normal at 6 weeks. So then I started questioning, was I doing it wrong? Or, you know, so just remembering that, again, like you said, it's all different. Some people feel amazing at 6 weeks, so we're not saying you won't,
absolutely,
but it's okay if you don't. It's okay if you're still congratulating yourself for getting up and showering and making it to the supermarket and back, or, you know, whatever it is that you're doing. So I think yeah, and in a way, self-isolation maybe takes the pressure off a little bit, because there isn't maybe there isn't that pressure to go and be out at lunching at the Tate or wherever. So yeah, take your time, take it slowly. And I think it's also important to know that you can't compare. So you and another lady might have had completely different births, so your recovery time will be different. You may have stuff come up emotionally for you that they haven't, so therefore that will be different. So we're so layered, like our postnatal and how we feel has got so much to do about who we are and where, like, what our journey has been as well. So you almost just can't compare two women, can you?
Of course you can't. You can't compare two babies. You can't compare the first baby you had and then the second baby you had. Just got to take each of those unique situations one step at a time. But certainly comparison is not helpful. But like Beccy said, maybe at the moment that won't be such an issue, because of the fact that nobody's going to be going out and, you know, taking their dogs for a walk on the common 3 days after the baby's born, potentially. I mean, I suppose at the moment you are still able to get out and about a little bit more, but we don't know what the weeks will bring. But just bearing that in mind, I think it's really useful.
And just remembering it's your journey, you know, it's no one else's journey. And also, like, there's no competition, there's no prize for the person who's up and about earlier, or, you know, so really, I know it's hard because it's easy to get sucked into what everyone else is doing, but make sure it's your journey and you take it at your pace. I'm quite a sensitive soul, so you know, if I'm feeling overwhelmed, I need to kind of hunker in and I need to not be out, and I need to just have time to myself to reflect and think, whereas some people really need to be outside socialising or, you know, kind of on the phone all the time socialising. So yeah, know yourself and kind of take your own lead, I think.
Now, it's going to be slightly different again at the moment because of the fact that people are going to be restricting mixing with others. So if you have a partner, you might find that your partner actually, this could be a slight positive to the situation, might be around for a bit longer, and even though they might be working from home, it's still somebody that you can call upon if you need another set of hands. So again, we talk sometimes about, you know, when that real exhaustion and fatigue kicks in that week, say, I don't know, and again, different for everybody, but potentially in that third week through to the 6 week sort of period, it might be handy that you can do a bit of tag teaming with your partner. So it may be that, I remember doing a visit and my lady was having a cup of tea and having a rest on the sofa, and her partner was doing a conference call with a baby in a papoose in the other room that was fast asleep, because it wouldn't let them put it down, which often happens with new babies because they're so comfortable and feel so safe when they're against us. And maybe that's something at the moment that's going to be more possible than it would have been beforehand. And when we talk about tag team sleeping, what we're referring to is the fact that if you're exclusively breastfeeding, for example, or I mean, if you're feeding your baby in different ways, to be honest with you, then you might be the one who is doing the feed. So perhaps you'll take the baby, do a nappy change, do the feed, and we're talking about in the night time now, but obviously this could be in the daytime as well. And then you sort of wake the partner up, unless they're going to be doing a very early shift with other children that you have. And I understand it depends on your circumstances. You know, you might have set it up so that you do the nights and then they do first thing in the morning. But perhaps what you could do is then, once you've done the feed, if you know that you're only going to get a couple of hours before the next feed, you see if they can do the settle, get the baby to go to sleep so you can sleep for a couple of hours, and then you can wait to do the next feed. We do what we can in those early weeks and months because it is a very tiring time for a lot of parents. because the babies are adjusting to being out here on the other side as well.
Yeah.
And when we talk about that fourth trimester, not only are we thinking about our adjustment as new parents to looking after these little human beings and ourselves as we heal and adjust to the new normal, but we're also looking at them, like their lives have completely changed from being nice and safe and cozy in the uterus to being out here in the world with us. And they're amazing, and their development is incredible, their brain development, and they're learning so much all the time, and it's incredibly stimulating for them. But it's also understandable why they don't like us to just pop them down in a silent room that perhaps is dark and where they don't feel the presence of other human beings around, and why they can find that quite unsettling as they adjust, which you tend to find, all babies are different, and they have different levels of sensitivity, but I'd say for a lot of babies, that first 6 weeks for them is a huge period of transition as well.
Definitely. And I think going back to the tag team sleeping, you get a very different kind of sleep when you're off duty. So it's about making sure that you have off-duty sleep, because often for us mums, particularly if you're exclusively breastfeeding, if we do sleep, we sleep with our ears on stalks because we're always listening out, waiting for baby. So knowing that you hand baby over and then you're off duty, and so you go to bed, and quite often you go into that really lovely deep restorative sleep, which you don't quite get into sometimes when you're listening out. And then you can do that for each other. You can let your partner have some off-duty sleep as well. So however you choose to play it, making sure that you just get that sleep where you're not listening out and waiting for baby to cry.
Absolutely. So I'm just trying to think about if there's anything else that we want to add on to this, really, thinking about those first couple of months. It's such a different time at the moment that it's just trying to think about different ways of doing it, because we won't be able to get out quite as much as, not at all as much as we were able to prior to this happening. And I think really just reiterate, the mother box is here. We're going to be posting videos every single day. If you have any questions, let us know. Obviously, and this was not about us promoting our book, but we did write the book, the little book of self-care for new mums, for this exact reason. It's not a manual, it's like a little guide, a little book to looking after your mind and your body in the year that follows the baby being born. Lots of incredible, really important information that you can find online, sharing that, seeing whether there are other new mums that that perhaps you've been connected through antenatal classes or clubs that you've been to prior to these babies being born, and just really looking out for each other more than ever. But I'm sure you'll be doing that anyway.
And we'll if we see, so we've already talked about Vanessa's online tutorials, but if we see any more of those coming up,
absolutely.
Any kind of mum meets, because I know some people who were doing mum get-togethers, we're going to try and do virtual ones. So if we see those coming up, we'll put them on as well. So just hopefully we just want to loads of resources down on our page, so just kind of scroll through and see.
And if you do know any other mums that perhaps don't know about the mother box and what we're up to here, and you think that this might be helpful for them, send them our way. Get them to come and follow what we're doing over here, because it's not just going to be about us. We've said this beforehand, but we've been blown away by friends of ours professionals in this industry who have said, I'll send a video over for you that you can put up for your mums. And one of our friends this morning who's going to be putting a lovely video up about baby sensory and communicating with your baby and having some lovely connected time with your baby in the first few weeks, was just said to us this morning, thank you so much for doing this and bringing everyone together. So that's what we're here for. Look after yourselves, and we will be on with another video tomorrow.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
See you later.